Julia Spencer is a real estate investor with over 25 years' experience who owns multiple investment properties. She's a single mother of two who moved to the U.S. in 1993 with only $20 in her pocket. She currently holds an MBA. Julia Spencer is neither a realtor nor an attorney, and the contents of this recording are only her opinions. Get her free guide to investing at juliamspencer.com. I'm your host, Dr. Steve G. Jones, multimillionaire and hypnotherapist. My website is stevegjones.com. Essential Landlord Guide. Module 5, Leases, Losses and Liability.
Hello, Julia M. Spencer here, real estate investor, advisor, and enthusiast. And I'm continuing my discussion on what and what should not be on a typical lease that you're drafting if you're a landlord, if you own property and you're renting it out. We've recently talked about, in the last module, about the area of utilities and whether utilities should be provided or not, or how you would structure that in a lease. Now I want to move into a little bit about property loss, the property loss section. Now, for sure, the tenant and the landlord, you and the tenant, you should agree on who's liable for what damages. This is a very important part of the lease that you have to talk about and put into a lease, because then there won't be any disagreements later on if there's actually any kind of damages. Now, as a landlord, actually by law, you are required to keep the property safe for the tenant. So if there's any issues with wiring being exposed or any kind of leakage or any kind of mold issues, those are the kinds of things that you as a landlord are responsible to take care of. Now, even if some of these things have occurred during the occupancy of the tenant of your property, you as a landlord are technically still liable to repair these things versus your tenant. And I want to point out a specific example here. There was a time that I had a tenant who we live obviously in the South, so we don't have a lot of freezing in the winter. But there was a time that I had a tenant that had some frozen pipes. And what happens is when water expands, when it's sitting in the pipes, it's possible that pipes can burst that way. And there's sometimes pipes that are outside that basically, if they're exposed to the air and the temperatures go below freezing, they basically freeze. And what that does is once the water expands inside the pipes, basically the pipes burst, which causes you to have plumbing issues and leakage. And this can happen anywhere outside. It can also happen if your house is built on top of a crawl space, which is also exposed to cold air because there's a space between the ground and the actual house. So you as a landlord are actually responsible to make sure that pipes, for example, if they're going to be exposed to the air, that they are covered or some way insulated so this may not happen. And that's one of the things that you are responsible for as a landlord. Another thing that you are going to be responsible for as a landlord is if you're renting out a property with appliances, which most likely you're going to, there's going to be a refrigerator, a stove, maybe an oven with a stove together, possibly appliances like washer and dryer or a dishwasher and a dishwasher, and for sure any kind of the other systems that are the background systems, basically, as I call them, the water heater, for example, as well as the heating and air conditioning system. All those kinds of things you as a landlord are going to be responsible to maintain and to fix. Now, what I always tell people, for example, specifically on the air conditioner and heating system, there's a requirement to change the air filter once every 30 days. Now, if that's not done, it's most likely that the air conditioner is at some point going to fail or is going to cause for the system to run not at its peak performance. And so you have to make sure that you write in the lease that the tenant is responsible if you don't do your inspections yourself and change these things yourself for maintenance, that your tenant changes out the filters or lets you know if there's a leakage, or basically the tenant is responsible to let you know that there's a problem. And most times you're going to be responsible as a landlord to fix those problems in a timely manner. And so you have to kind of work with your tenant. It's a very delicate kind of relationship that you're in. Now, I want to caveat that a little bit because a lot of times things can happen that are out of the control of the landlord or the tenant. For example, if you have trees on your house, on your property near the house, and limbs fall down and damage the roof or damage maybe some property outside, maybe a car that was parked outside or something like that, you want to make sure that you write in the lease that you, as the landlord, you're not responsible for any kinds of those damages. And it is the responsibility of the tenant to upkeep insurance on their personal property that's on the premises. And that includes, obviously, the vehicles outside, but also, for example, and I want to point this out very specifically because this has happened to me, if there's a plumbing issue, for example, that ruined the rugs inside an apartment floor because the floor got all soaked, well, or maybe some furniture or any other items that belong to the tenant that were there, and they are damaged or destroyed by any kind of flood or any kind of other issues, or maybe if there was a fire or something like that, you want to make sure you write in the lease that you as the landlord are not responsible for things that are out of your control, and that you strongly and highly encourage your tenants and even make sure that you tell them this, that they have tenants or renters insurance on their property. And most tenants, in fact, 99% of tenants that I know do not have any such insurance at all whatsoever, don't even know half the time that it exists. But when you sit down with your tenant and you go through the lease and you do the signing and the handing over the keys, make sure you tell them, it's like, look, all the items that are in this house.
For your free guide to real estate investing, visit juliamspencer.com.